Paul Sykes, 6'3", boxer's nose. Um, Very, very scary character, I would imagine, if you've seen him in the flesh. Not only was he unbelievable with them, but his mind was like something else. And even the police told me, and the prison authorities said he was far greater than what they usually dealt with. But there's a few sides I discovered from people who had dealings with Paul. Obviously I did the free books, which one guy was he's talking about meeting Paul Sykes around a fishing lake, and people could see him coming. He was like literally the Wakefield bogeyman, and they were like, "Oh shit, there's Sykesy." Many of them pretended not to see him, which I'm told would only like anger him. Apparently when people used to see him, if you made more of an effort and got to know him, then you would kind of win his respect. And there's actually a little tale in that book where there's a guy called Alan Jones, I think. He actually sees him, and Sykes kind of goes over to him, and he's like, ready to kick off and cause trouble, as he did. And what totally threw Paul Sykes was the guy just went, because obviously everyone knew him, even if he didn't know them, everyone knew him. And he said, "Hiya, Paul." He said, "Take a seat, get yourself a can, and sit down." And he said, "You know something, Jamie?" He said, "The conversation I had with him for the next hour was probably the deepest I've had with anyone." He said, I wish I'd have recorded it. I wish I could have made some notes." He just sat there and he was talking about life. He said to him, he said, "Look at my hands." And he said his hands were in bits. He said, I literally remember looking at his hands thinking, they're the tools of literally 1,000 wars. And then he started talking about fishing, looking at Paul Sykes, looking at the maggots. And he said, "Look at them. I wonder what their life's like. I wonder what they think about. I wonder whether they have sex," and all these kind of bizarre, really deep conversations. And he said, looking back now, he said a lot of people just thought he was this big Neanderthal monster, if you like, thick thug, and he was the opposite. I spoke to a number of people over the years. There's a lady, I think she's passed now, but there was one in Further Agony, and she was a security in Asda, Tesco or somewhere like that in Wakefield. And she weeks before she'd got the job, she was told, "Listen, Paul Sykes comes in our store. When he comes in, don't approach him, don't give him eye contact. Like the wild bears, because it's kind of like the gorillas, I think it is. It's like in the animal kingdom, it's a direct threat." So she was given all these things, and everyone in the shop used to basically avoid him like a plague, like a leper. And she said to me, she said, "You know something?" She said, "I just spoke to him like a human being, because when I went up to him and he could see that I was following him and looking at him, he had an attitude. And then when she actually come out of fire, Chuck, how you doing, and give him a bit of warmth back, she said his body language, his whole demeanour changed. And that's what he was. A lot of people, well, I didn't know him, but a lot of people did know him, and you've heard all the monster stories, but there was a different side to him. That book again, Gavin Hepworth. I think he's around 14 pages, really fabulous chapter. And he's talking, because he grew up on the back of Paul, and he knew him from being a monster to at the end of his life. And he said he was part of the security that used to watch Paul Sykes in like a gang of, I suppose, how would you describe them? Undesirables of life, alcoholics, druggies. And they would all monitor him. They'd all watch him on cameras. And this one day he said, I could see Sykes and a gang going around nicking bags, like clothing and what people give to charity. And even though he was, obviously you've seen the picture of Sykes when he's got literally about 8 jackets on. That was November 2004, just over 2.5 years before he died. And to look at that picture, you'd think you couldn't get any lower than that, but you actually could, or he did, which is really, really tragic. But he said, although he was like literally rock bottom in life, like literally living in skips, walking down the streets, picking pasties off the floor. He said even though they were out robbing, trying to, make a few quid for his drink and that, he said, I could see him on the camera. And he said there was all these things that had been left out for the kids. And the gang who Sykes was with were just basically picked him up. And Sykes turned around to them and said, "Oi, leave that alone. That's for the kids. Leave it alone, or I'll give you a lugging," which was one of his favourite sayings. And then the gang literally left it and just continued robbing other. So that's a different side. Because obviously you've heard all the tales of the monster, the evil brute who, you've heard all the stories. Lots of you watching these videos will knew him, remember him. But there was a different side to him, and I think it's quite thought-provoking now, even though he literally lived, there's pictures in here. You've seen him, I can't find him at the minute. But obviously this was when he had the massive grey beard and he was dishevelled, could not get any further rock bottom. He still had that little bit of humane bit of decency about him. And, I'm always told that a lot of people, I've met so many people now, literally in the hundreds, who had experiences with Sykes. And they said, that it was always, even if you met him once, that you remembered the conversation with him. But yeah, he was a one-off, and it doesn't really get spoken about, does it? Because it doesn't really sell the papers. It's not really as interesting as his stories about punching sharks. It's not as interesting about allegedly raping people in prison or, terrorising the city of Wakefield. But he did have that bit of, funny enough, actually, I spoke to 4 top-level police officers who, I can't name them, but they've said, he wasn't what he was, and he did have a lot of decency. I spoke to prison officers, and they said, what, even though he was what he was, and he was a scary, scary human being. He said, this sounds really crazy, but he said you could actually turn your back on him because he wasn't what you call a back jumper in prison. If he had a problem with you, he wanted to be standing in front of you. And I think he just had them kind of morals. He had a code, his own code, which he lived by, and obviously he died by. But he's an interesting character, and obviously it's going to be over to Western Edge Pictures now to do more stuff on the film and the documentary. But as I just wanted to just highlight that, if anyone wants to read more, obviously there's the books. There's 5 books on Amazon. You can buy them all. Sykes, Sweet Agony, Unfinished Agony, Further Agony, Final Agony, and It's Sharks by Rob Brenton. All done by War Cry Publishing. And yeah, it all builds up a picture of an unbelievable one of character. But it doesn't often get spoke about, but he did have a little bit of a human side. However small that was, I don't know. And there's a lot of stories I've heard like that, very, very tragic, very, very sad, where you think, looking back, you think, do you know what, you were obviously clearly unwell. He's been gone now, coming up for 14 years, and even since his death, mental health doesn't really get... I think in the last 5 years, mental health is huge. Everyone seems to be a mental health ambassador, or if they've been an ex-criminal, they're an expert on it. But obviously, you're talking about a character there who clearly was, how can I put it without being disrespectful, mentally unhinged. But would he have had different treatment now if it was more in the limelight? Would he have been? Well, he was sectioned, but we'll never know, will we? But yeah, absolutely fascinating character. So yeah, don't forget to click and subscribe to this channel. There's going to be more Sykes content over this year. We're going to keep you updated on the film and the documentary. And yeah, thank you so much. God bless. Keep following the page.